Welcome to Building the Future, hosted by Kevin Horick. With millions of listeners a month, Building the Future has quickly become one of the fastest rising programs, with a focus on interviewing startups, entrepreneurs, investors, CEOs, and more. The radio and TV show airs in 15 markets across the globe, including Silicon Valley. For full showtimes, past episodes, or to sponsor the show, please visit buildingthefutureshow.com.
Today's show is brought to you by OnPay, the new standard in payroll. You can pay employees and contractors in minutes, automate your payroll taxes and filings, as well as provide health benefits and HR in all 50 states. For more information, visit buildingthefutureshow.com/onpay. Welcome back to the show. Today we have Avis Savar. He's the president at Suzy. Avi, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much. I'm excited to be part of this. This is awesome.
Yeah, I'm excited to have you on the show. I think what you guys are doing at Suzy is really innovative and cool. But maybe before we get into that, let's get to know you a little bit better and start off with where you grew up.
Sure. So I grew up mostly in California. I was born in Israel, but spent the better part of my, let's call them formative years in Los Angeles. And then I ended up in Boston for my undergraduate. I went to Boston University, and then just kind of stayed out on the East Coast. And now I'm a New Yorker, and I'm married to a New Yorker. And once you do that, you kind of never leave. So I've been in New York now for the better part of about 25 years or so.
Very cool. So what did you take in university and why?
So I studied communications, really with a focus on broadcasting and film. I've always been, kind of a storyteller at heart, and the world of film and video, obviously, back in the 90s when I was coming of age, was very different than what it is today, and really that kind of launched my career. I started my life in production, and spent the better part of my early professional career as a television producer. And from there, I spent a number of years, between Viacom, producing series and specials for VH1, across MTV networks. I was a producer at Good Morning America for quite some time. And for the better part of, probably 10, 12 years or so, had the chance to produce content in almost every format. Live television was where I kind of cut my teeth, and then went into longer format, series and specials. And then, call it early 2000s, right around 2003, 2004 is when I decided it was time for me to kind of hang up my own shingle. And I went off and started what was then a production company, which eventually kind of grew and morphed into more of a marketing and communications firm. And the timing of that was all kind of circled around the world of social media and video on the web. If you recall, YouTube basically came out of the gate in, I want to say it's 2005. I started my company in 2004, just to give you, some context. So the world of video and content that was predominantly driven through broadcast networks was beginning to shift online. And you had really a lot of the portals that controlled the front door of the internet. AOL, MSN, Yahoo. They were really the front doors of the internet, and they were starting to make really big investments in video. And then the world of YouTube and all the social platforms that began to emerge right around that time kind of took content online in a crazy direction, and it became really the Wild West for a while. And that's when my company kind of really grew up. I launched my company in 2004, navigated it through a pretty dramatic financial crisis, and came out the other side of it, and was fortunate enough to grow it to relatively scalable size. And in 2011, I sold my company to the Publicis Group. At that time, we were one of the largest kind of content social media specialty agencies, and really handling large scale social agency of record assignments with brands like General Motors and Aflac and T-Mobile and Gatorade and a number of brands. So that's kind of where my world started. It was a pretty, albeit it sounds like a dramatic shift from being a TV producer to moving into the world of marketing. But, for me, it was relatively natural in that my entire, reason for being and premise as an organization was to help brands ultimately become publishers and help them build audiences and connect with consumers in ways that they hadn't before. And I think my background in storytelling, in production, and in producing all these various formats kind of gave me a unique opportunity to come in with, a very different narrative, and start to move the world of advertising from, very much a, sell me product to, help me and engage with me, paradigm. So it really became about, helping brands, become publishers, tell really great stories, engage with consumers in ways that they really hadn't been before, and now is a very big part of the fabric of marketing and communications. Is this idea of engagement. Engagement wasn't a term in advertising, until we started kind of doing the things that we were doing, along with a number of other very reputable firms like, my company was called Big Fuel, other brands like Deep Focus, MRY. These were like some of the big, kind of hot shots that were coming up around the same time as my firm. And we were all aligned around this idea that, brands could no longer interrupt people and force them, to watch a 30-second commercial. And we were really moving towards much more of an engagement model where we had to tell stories and connect with audiences and build longer term relationships. And frankly, that's a natural segue into what I do today as president of Suzy. We are all about helping brands understand consumers and do it in real time so that they can really develop breakthrough products and experiences and create value in the world other than, just selling their products. And so that voice of the consumer has been a thread in my life since, my career began. Is, what do audiences want? What stories resonate? Making people laugh, making people cry, making people smile has always been, my world. And the byproduct of that becomes love my product, buy my product, use my product because, it helps you. And so here we are, 20 plus years later, and the path has taken me from, broadcast television to marketing services and now into software. And it's been an incredible journey. I've learned a whole hell of a lot. But that's really been the thread for me is helping connect the dots between what people care about and what brands kind of need them to do, and what and how they could better navigate, large scale consumers.
Very cool. So how does Suzy do that for brands now with everything kind of being digital, right? And like during this pandemic, and how, well, I guess, no, a better question would be like, how did it do it before? And how is it the same and different during the pandemic? And then let's transition into, how do you think, or predictions for if what will go back to kind of pre-pandemic type stuff?
Sure, it's a great question. It's pretty nuanced actually. I think I'll give you a little context first and just say, like, pre-pandemic, everything in the world was slowly moving towards kind of digital disruption, and everything had always kind of been the concept of software eating the world, wasn't new. And I think what the pandemic has done in many cases, is accelerated all of that. Whether you're looking at education, healthcare, every industry has now been accelerated by digital transformation as a result of the pandemic. And market research is no different. When Suzy was launched about 3 years ago, the vision and premise, was digital disruption, but that had already been started. Like, we didn't start that trend. SurveyMonkey, Qualtrics, there are brands that have been in the space for, 10, 15 plus years trying to disrupt the traditional market research landscape. And I think, very successfully so. But I think what we've seen is that, especially post-pandemic, the world of market research has been disrupted pretty dramatically, insofar that, the industry at large, which is, probably an addressable market of about 50 to 60 or so billion dollars, about 30% of that, give or take, is in person, right? You're
Sure.
talking about, in-person focus groups. You're talking about, audience polls coming out of movie theaters. All this stuff, like about 30% of the market, is driven by in-person interaction, and pretty much overnight that's gone. And so the need for, digital workflows and digital systems to help fill in those gaps, not just because, frankly, the world was different, from an operational standpoint as it relates to market research, but damn, like, the consumer paradigm was entirely disrupted. So everything every brand ever knew about a consumer leading up to March of 2020, it was totally thrown out of whack. Every behavior, every shift had been, accelerated, and trends that brands could have counted on were totally disrupted. And so it was, in many ways, a perfect storm of disruption within digital market research, because it made the need for research at large, more prevalent. Meaning, I'm a brand, my consumer is now socially distant, staying at home, not doing the things that they were doing, 36 hours ago. How do I navigate that, right? Is my product still relevant to them? Are they still willing to buy it? How much are they willing to spend on it? What other products are in their wheelhouse now that may or may not be impacting my market share? You saw a huge trend in, like, these, like, more, let's call them old school products, coming back into the consumer mindset in a very powerful way. The brands like, Method were replaced by, Dial, and the, organic green, the green cleansers are now replaced with, Clorox. And so the shift in behavior was really profound. And I think that just really opened the floodgates for online market research to not just become, a necessary part of the toolkit, but the agility behind market research has never been a strong suit, right? Market research has predominantly been relatively slow to move, generally expensive, reserved for larger brands. And now all of a sudden, these large brands and small brands alike needed to, like, be agile. And the only way to do that is to leverage digital, right? You don't have 6 weeks to wait for a 30 slide deck that a strategist and a researcher are going to put together for you, after a bunch of research. You need answers now. You're about to go into your boss's office and pitch for your life, because your products are being disrupted and services are being appended, and what do you do? So a platform like Suzy, we were solving this before the pandemic, and now during the pandemic, we've seen such a rise in demand for what it is that we've done, and frankly has made us, actually look at the world of market research in a slightly different way. We're, on our roadmap, we had a lot of things going and planned for this year. We've completely retooled our roadmap. We just launched our second product called Suzy Live. Suzy Live is on-demand video interviews with consumers. So in-person focus groups, in-person market research is a thing of the past. So now, how do I talk to a consumer? And how do I do it efficiently, and how do I talk to the exact consumer that I want to speak with? So Suzy Live was launched, last week, out of the gate, and has really been a very powerful complement to the core Suzy product. So really thinking about how we combine qualitative and quantitative research in a toolkit for brands to be able to really put the voice of the consumer, like, at the table with them in the room. I think a big part of the value proposition that we are putting into the world is agility and speed. It's something that even pre-pandemic, digital market research hasn't really been able to provide in the same level of quality. And I think we've got a product and a suite that has done really unique and powerful things in the space that hasn't been seen before. And I think part of that is why we're seeing the relative success we're seeing. We've grown the business from about 18, 20 customers to over 200 customers, in less than 2 years, and raised a pretty sizable round of funding earlier in the year to continue, pushing that level of growth. And we're just getting started here.
No, that's great. So maybe give us some examples of how people and companies use Suzy to actually do these kind of insights and get them what they're looking for.
Yeah, so great question. I think to overly simplify it, I would say there are three kind of primary areas of focus within an organization that leverage Suzy and what Suzy does. The first is in, let's call it, kind of core research and insights, right? All research departments, insights departments, R&D departments within an organization, they need access to data, they need access to consumers to do their job, and they tend to kind of service their broader organizations. So we work with a lot of insights departments and a lot of research groups within big brands. They use Suzy for a number of different use cases. Second is innovation, right? Innovation, new product development, R&D. It's the development of new services, new products, new functions, new features. They need access to consumers to ultimately determine if what they're buying is even worth making, or sorry, if what they're making is worth putting out in the marketplace. So innovation departments tend to lean on Suzy for a number of use cases. And then you have this kind of world of advertising, content, and marketing, right? The right message, the right creative, the right pricing model, the right kind of go-to-market strategy, right? And then, once you're in market, you're doing optimization, you're trying to see, what and how your product is performing once you've launched it. So if you look at the broader commercialization funnel, from the moment somebody has an idea of a product or service to having to validate, 100 different assumptions, all the way through to the development of that product, through manufacturing and processes, all the way into the packaging, the design, the pricing of it, to how it goes into market. Every part of that commercialization funnel benefits from having consumers at the table. Historically, what's tended to happen is these different parts of the, let's call it the commercialization funnel, have tended to have stage gates, meaning you go from one stage to the next stage to the next stage, and research tended to be bookended. You do a little research up front to define and dictate kind of how you do what you do. Then you do a little research at the end of that stage gate to maybe validate the work that you've done, and then you move into the next stage. And that assembly line starts to form, and you're doing research at the beginning and end of each stage. And what we're saying is that's just kind of not the way to do it. Right? In order to truly be effective in a world that's moving faster and faster, and consumer behavior really, kind of evolving as rapidly as the news cycle, that you need to have the consumer at the table with you throughout the entire process, not just at the beginning and end of each stage. And that's really the value of Suzy. And I think part of that is also our, overall go-to-market strategy, which is not, very typical in the research world. Digital research, online research has very much been a project-based model. You buy respondents on the open market, responses to surveys, you're buying as you go. And we came out of the gate and said, that's kind of the wrong incentive structure for brands, because it almost disincentivizes research. The more research you do, the more expensive it gets. The more often you do it, the more cumbersome it becomes. And so Suzy is an always-on platform. We don't, unlike most of our competitors, we don't buy responses from programmatic exchanges. A large majority of survey responses that are generated through companies like SurveyMonkey and Qualtrics, et cetera, are all bought on exchanges. Right? So the audiences are very fragmented. They're all over the place. And it's a cost per interaction or a cost per complete model. And we came out of the gate and said, that's just not how we want to do business. We want to turn this into an always-on software experience. And so you pay for access to the software and the audience are bundled together. So you're not paying for every response that gets generated. You're paying for access to the audience and the types of actions that you want to launch to that audience. So the pricing model, the go-to-market strategy is very different. It's also very kind of enterprise focused, right? It's not really meant for small to medium-sized businesses who really the ad hoc pay as you go model makes a lot more sense, right? The budgets and the dedicated resources aren't really there for those size companies. Whereas for the enterprise, research is embedded into the fabric of how they do business. And is a big part of their share of wallet and in their overall budgeting. And so, when you look at those enterprises, Suzy makes a lot of sense, right? It's cheaper than project-based ad hoc. If you look at it in aggregate, the value proposition allows you to talk to consumers at will. The audience is native to the product, so you can retarget audiences and build longitudinal studies and talk to them over time. So, it makes a lot more sense if research is part of your DNA as a large enterprise. And that's really kind of the sweet spot that we've been able to carve out for ourselves is large brands who value consumer interaction and opinions and are looking for better ways to be more agile with a higher quality audience and a business model or pricing model that is a lot more attractive, frankly.
Okay, no, that makes sense. But then like even on your homepage, you said a brand used you guys to test like ad concepts for a Super Bowl TV spot. Like, how did you guys find the consumers that, enjoy Super Bowl Sunday? Like, how do you find the target audience that I'm looking for as a brand?
Yep, great question. So, we have two parts to our business, right? The business side is Suzy. The consumer side, we have a number of platforms. Our primary platform is called CrowdTap. CrowdTap is a community of consumers. They sign up to join the network. It's a gamified experience. They, once they sign up, they go through, a process of kind of getting onboarded and verified. So we actually know that it's a real human being, and they tell us a little bit about themselves. And then they get the opportunity to kind of engage with the game and earn points for their participation. And typically they're participating through answering questions and participating in certain activities. So, the more they engage, the more points they get, and they can leverage those points for, gift cards to, any major retailer, Amazon, Walmart, Nike, NBA store, Sephora, you name it. There are gift cards that talk to different types of audiences. They could donate those points to charity. So there's a number of different ways they can engage. So on the flip side of the kind of the business experience, which I've talked about, is the consumer experience. And we're building and have built a consumer experience that values, the consumer. Whereas, if you look at many of the kind of consumer panel companies that exist out there that are selling responses, they treat consumers very much like a commodity. It's how much, how cheap can I buy a response, and how much can I sell that response for? And it's a very different paradigm. And for us, we kind of don't believe in that model. You have to have that if you're trying to scale and service, the entire market research, industry. But we're not trying to service the entire market research industry. We're trying to service our customers. And with that, we know we have, a large enough sample size. We've got about 1.5 million consumers who have opted into the network. We manage that for quality and speed and national, representation. So it's mapped to census, et cetera. And that allows us to, be statistically significant and also maintain the right level of audience interaction and quality, right? If you look at, I'll give you a good, interesting example, right? Nielsen, who, powers, billions and billions of dollars of ad spend in the open market. Their Nielsen Families product, which is core to their service, is 37,000 set-top boxes, right? 37,000 set-top boxes is 0.1% or something like that of the overall population. And that is statistical significance for viewing habits to basically be determined for the entire industry. So we don't need 100 million consumers in our network. We need, frankly, the right 50,000. And with that, kind of model, we're able to build, a network infrastructure to support our audience and the types of audiences that we're engaging with. And then on the flip side, be able to deliver that value back to our clients in a way that drives, speed and agility. And so, a typical client can ask Suzy, or the Suzy audience a question, and within 10 minutes, they've got, 200 to 300 responses. And, within about 10, 15 minutes, they've got 500 responses. And for them, that 500 response, like that is statistically significant, enough so that they can really make decisions on a regular basis. And that changes the world for them of, real time, to having to wait to make decisions. And I think that's a big deal.
Okay. So, but how do you guys actually go out and find those consumers? Like, you have to get them onboarded onto the
Yep.
platform. So like, if you have a client that says, I want to test in this vertical, or we're launching a new product in this vertical, if you don't have those people, how do you go out how do you go about recruiting those people and get them into the platform?
Yep. So it's a great question. So a lot of it is frankly organic. About 80% of our audience base comes to the CrowdTap front door, organically. Okay. That's just built on reviews and ratings and being, kind of out with organic content and driving just a growth in community. And so, about 10,000 or so people show up to the front door of CrowdTap every month organically, okay, and apply to join, right?
Gotcha.
And it's an application process. Only about 20% of the overall consumers that apply actually get in. So, we really are looking to curate the right audience mechanism for our broader, audience makeup. Meaning, we know we have, a ton of, let's call them, Midwestern housewives and moms. We need more African-American males. We know we need more Hispanic females. So we know within our audience base where we need to throttle up and throttle down, right? You kind of look at it almost like a cell phone network, right? We have towers, and if we, if one of the nodes of the towers, tells us that we need more of a certain, type of demographic, then, we can go out and specifically target and recruit in those areas, and we're constantly just mapping to census. So for us, making sure that our, our overall audience, our, kind of active, engaged audience, our daily actives, our monthly actives, are in line with where census is. And we're constantly looking at that. So we measure and look at our audience business in 3 key areas. We call it, it's kind of cheeky, but we call it an SDQ score: speed, demographics, and quality. So if we can deliver 500 responses inside of 30 minutes, nobody can beat us on speed. Demographics needs to be statistically relevant and significant and mapped to U.S. Census population. And then quality, right? Making sure that fraud and spam are not in the system, right? You would be shocked to know that in the typical market research, digital world, 20 to 25% of survey responses that come in through the open market are fraudulent or spam. 25%, sure. Right? So we maintain a spam fraud rate below 2.5%, right? And we don't cleanse our data. So for us, it's speed, quality, and demographics. Those are the 3 key areas of focus for the audience. And so luckily, a good part of our core audience growth is organic. And then, on those quote unquote hard to reach audience, buckets, we maintain and manage, dedicated communities. We do some paid media acquisition. We do some influencer outreach. So it's very much a social community building, modality.
Okay, no, that makes sense. So maybe give us some other examples of how companies leverage Suzy to validate their product or one of their variations or shopping, or just give us maybe some more use cases of how people have used the product.
Sure. I mean, there's your kind of the typical ones where you want to do a concept test and you're testing, three different, variations of a package design, or maybe frankly you're testing 20 and you want to get it down to your top three. So then you can take those top three and move them into, a more hardcore, research methodology that will take longer, right? And so it allows you to very rapidly validate, and that's one of the key benefits. So, you've got your basic, concept tests. You've got pricing testing, things like that. And then you go into the kind of the slightly outer rim, and really new use cases that we didn't even think would be something to consider are now also popping up. Use cases like sales enablement, right? We've got, advertising sales groups at large entertainment companies that are using Suzy to really understand consumer behavior and use that research and data to go back to their customers and sell, right? So a good example of that would be, let's call it, I'll make it a hypothetical because I don't want to use existing customers. Let's see, tri-state, car dealership, is a potential customer for a brand like, iHeart or some large, publisher, and the salesperson is about to call on, this prospect. They can then go to that prospect and say, I know that your target consumer also listens to this kind of music and also enjoys these three things. So as they sell to their core customers, they have research and data to back up their proposals, right? You've got big food and beverage brands that are using Suzy data when they pick up the phone and engage with Walmart to try to get shelf space. They're using data to defend shelf space. Oh, we know that people who buy this also like our product, so you should put our product next to this product. And it's helping them defend and expand shelf space. We've got really interesting use cases that are totally out there, like machine learning and AI training, right, that needs human input. And so you want to be able to get human input into training algorithms. That's something that we never thought about before and is starting to kind of get interesting. So it's everything from what you would expect, right? I want to test an idea. I want to narrow down my assumptions around pricing or go to market or campaign development, or I want to decide which three products I should actually put into production, and I can only pick one. So I need to whittle that down, all the way to like these kind of newfangled concepts where research and data was never really accessible. And now we've kind of opened it up that it's so easy to use and anybody can kind of access it, that it's showing us the real power of what we can do.
Oh, very cool. So what do you think the future of this space is? Do you think it's going to go more digital? Do you think it's going to go back into the physical world? Is it a little bit of both? And obviously your answer might be different like once we're out of the pandemic, but
Yeah.
what are your thoughts on kind of the future of the space?
Yeah, it's another great question. Listen, I think the world will go back to in person. The question is when, and when it does, I think you will see that new behaviors and new modes of working will now also influence that. So I don't think the world of in-person research is gone, by no means. The question is how much will it be dominant versus what it used to be. Just like now, a lot of businesses are thinking to themselves, maybe I don't need as big of an office space and people can work remotely and come in different ways. And so you're seeing that take shape in real estate conversations about how businesses go back to work. You're seeing that take shape in education and how, students are learning. And I don't think it's going to be any different in market research. I think what we're seeing now is that this like explosion of tools is going to create a new paradigm for the people that were working in those industries, and they're just going to add them to their toolkit. And then over time, there will likely be some consolidation. The world of traditional market research is already beginning to consolidate and expand. You're seeing, Nielsen and Kantar, shedding business units to focus in on some of their core competencies. So, they're looking at the future in the same respects. They're giving a lot of time and attention to the digital platforms that are emerging because they know it's coming. So I don't think it's one or the other. Frankly, I think it's the right blend. It's like it's a silly phrase, but it's the right horse for the right course. And so there are a lot of different horses that run a lot of different courses. And now we're just seeing that digital, is a lead horse in the race because there's no other horse to play.
Yeah,
The
that's fair.
question the question then eventually becomes, great, in your stable, I can't believe I'm using this analogy all the way through, but in this in this stable, you're gonna have some new horses in how you do things. So I'm excited to see what happens going forward, and we're looking at it holistically. Like we look at what we're trying to build is a almost a market research cloud, very much the way Adobe has built a creative cloud, and Microsoft has built an office cloud. We think that the world of market research, and is going to go in that same route. And so that's why, it's not a one size fits all. It's, we launched Suzy Live, we've launched Suzy Audiences, we've got our core Suzy Insights platform, and over time you'll see a suite of tools that will make up the overall toolkit. And we're trying to think about it in a much more open, holistic, nature, so that we can leverage what is core to our business, which is our audiences, and the fact that we own our own audiences and we don't buy audiences on the open market. It gives us a leg up to be able to do things that others can't. And that's the kind of foundation of it all. And then from there, we can very quickly iterate and launch something like Suzy Live, which is basically a video conferencing interface, and scheduling interface on top of our audience. And we've got our core Suzy Insights platform that is about accessing that audience with different types of activities so that you can do different types of research. Eventually we're looking at adding different types of tools and really unique things that leverage our audience base. And, our hope is to, kind of be that insights platform of record that starts to develop the overall market research cloud for large brands.
No, that makes sense. So you mentioned it earlier. You had to obviously, and a lot of companies had to do it, change their product roadmap based on kind of the pandemic and everything that's happening. But traditionally, how do you guys decide which features to add? Because you have some big brands that have potentially a lot of money to spend. And I'm assuming that you're building the platform so everybody has the same feature set. But
Yep.
It's tricky if a big brand, a multi-billion-dollar brand comes to you and says, we really want these features and we're willing to spend X amount of dollars. How do you manage like those requests compared to sticking with your product roadmap? Do you stray sometimes and actually add those features for maybe that company and everybody else on the platform? Or how do you guys manage all that?
It's a fantastic question. It's the thing that keeps me up at night most of all, right, is prioritization. As a software company, you only get a few swings at bat every year, right? There's limited time, limited resources, and infinite requests, right? We have a laundry list of things we want to do that's going to take, 10 years arguably to build out.
Sure.
And like any big software company, right? Whether you're Amazon as a software-based retailer, frankly, or whether you're Apple or Salesforce, right? These folks know where their products are going and they know well in advance. And I think for the first time in our history as a company, we're starting to gain a little bit of that visibility and foresight. Up until about 6-8 months ago, certainly well pre-pandemic, we were, still are a scrappy startup, but, funding, we hadn't raised our Series C yet. And so you really only have a few key swings at bat. And it was very difficult, frankly, to do that. So you're constantly juggling the needs of your customers with where you want the product to be, where your vision of the future of market research is, which oftentimes doesn't align to what your customers are asking for in the moment.
Sure.
Right? So you're balancing this like, clouds and dirt approach. You're like in the dirt every day, grinding, but you also need to be thinking a little bit in the clouds about where the world is headed. And we didn't really have the ability to do that up until, frankly, the beginning of this year. And the timing was kind of crazy because we closed our funding. Our first close was in February. 3 weeks later, we're in, pandemic mode.
Right.
So we were very fortunate that, we had money in the bank and were able to look really proactively at where the world was headed. And we made a bet around Suzy Live, which was not in our roadmap, right, for this year. We had thought about it for later down the road, and we had so many other things we wanted to do. but all of a sudden overnight, in-person market research is gone. And so not only did we kind of get a sense from our customers of where the gaps were that they were faced in, but also the market opportunity, like, and the white space that we can begin to fill based on our value proposition, and our premise, our mission as an organization is to enable human understanding, right? At our core, we are about helping the world understand humanity better. And right now we're in a place, or certainly back in March, we're at a place where nobody knew anything. Human understanding was in a spiral, and so our roadmap was influenced by the world at large. And now, we have an approach that we put into place at the beginning of this year, really borrowed from some of the best software companies in the world that we learned from, which is this idea of like, rocks, pebbles, and sand. You get, one big rock launch of recorder, one big thing that's like a boulder that moves, moves mountains. And then you've got, a bunch of pebbles that need to get done, like the day-to-day, the requests from customers, the feature enhancements, the, making the experience better. And then you got a bunch of pebbles. Then you got a bunch of sand, right? Those are the bug fixes, the small things that you need to do in order to support a world-class software enterprise. And up until last year, we launched Suzy at South by Southwest in 2018, and that was really the only rock that we ever launched. And then it was just a whole bunch of sand and pebbles for a long time to fill in the gaps, make sure the customers are happy, make sure that we're iterating and innovating where customers need us to. And Suzy Live this year was our first really big new rock launch. And what we're trying to do now going forward is every quarter at least ship one big rock. That is our place to tell the world where we think things are headed, right? Those once a quarter we get one swing, and those are the big stories. And then every 2 weeks, we're shipping code, and the product team is cranking. And every 2 weeks, we're knocking out pebbles and we're knocking out sand and making sure that our customers are happy, the experience is working, there are no bugs in the system, and we're taking feedback on a regular basis. So really, that's how we've started to balance things out. Is I can tell you now, I can't say it publicly, but I can tell you that I know what our next 4 rocks are, right? Which basically means the 4 big things on our roadmap going into 2021. For the first time in the history of the company, like, I can tell you a year out what those rocks are. The sand and the pebbles are a little bit more iterative and real time, and taking feedback and making sure we're course correcting appropriately. And that's how we started to kind of think about it, right? How we manage priorities. And it's been really good from that perspective. It allows us to live in the clouds and understand where the world is going, but be there, present in the dirt every day, and make sure we're creating value, every 2 weeks that we ship code.
Oh, makes total sense. But we're kind of coming to the end of the show. So how about we close with mentioning where people can get more information about Suzy, and any other links you want to mention?
Awesome. I appreciate that. So, Suzy.com, SUZY.com, is our website. In addition to learning about our products and our offering there, we also have a real-time insights hub. We've made a very big investment in content since the beginning of this year. We have a platform in Suzy that allows us to really kind of have access to the pulse of the nation. And we've almost, living up to our mission of enabling human understanding. Every 2 weeks, we host a State of the Consumer webcast. And we're getting upwards of 1,000 people registering for each one of those webcasts, which is phenomenal. Those webcasts are not about learning about Suzy; they are about understanding consumers. So I urge you all to you go to Suzy.com and sign up to join our newsletter and our mailing list. To get access to really insightful content about where the world is going as it relates to consumer behavior. And of course, if you're in the market and need real-time insights as part of your organization, we're certainly happy to tell you more about Suzy Live, Suzy Insights, and our audience products. So in any way, shape, or form that we can be of service, we are here.
Perfect. Well, I really appreciate you taking time out of your day to be on the show, and I look forward to keeping in touch with you, and have a good rest of your day.
Thank you so much, Kevin. Really appreciate it. Thanks for having me. And you guys can access my contact information on social media. I'm at Avis Savar. If you need to get in touch, by all means, I'm here and ready, willing, and able to answer any questions that you have or anybody else has.
Perfect. Thanks very much.
Cool.
Okay.
Thanks,
bye.
Kevin. Really appreciate it. Bye.
Yeah, bye.
Thanks for listening. Please visit our website at buildingthefutureshow.com to join the free community, sign up for our newsletter, or to sponsor the show. The music is done by Electric Mantra. You can check him out at electricmantra.com and keep building the future.